Okay, good morning everyone. Our topic for today is about research design. So, the study design is the plan adopted by the researcher in the conduct of a study. Why is it important? It is important that the researcher selects the appropriate study design to minimize errors and avoid reaching wrong conclusion. Okay, this day Okay, we're going to define, describe, and illustrate the most commonly used experimental and non-experimental research design. Okay, what are our objectives? Number one, to define what study design is. Number two, explain the meaning of reliability and validity in the research. Okay, so the research design is very important for us to know or to determine the validity and reliability of the research being conducted. Number three, identify and describe the different kinds of validity threats and how to handle each. Number four, to describe the different kinds of research design and distinguish the experimental from the non-experimental designs. Okay, determine the appropriate research designs for specific types of research problem. And of course, lastly, select an important design for their own research problem. Okay, let's have to define first what is design. Okay, design is a set of instructions for the researcher. Okay, to gather and analyze data in certain ways that will control who and what are to be studied. Okay, thus, the choice of design is made when the question is finalized. Okay, a good researcher or a good research requires a good design. Okay, the use of an appropriate design minimizes the occurrence of error in the conduct of the study and in the conclusions drawn from the study. So, kumbaga, ang design, it is like a perspective plan ng isang building or ng isang bahay if you are constructing. Okay, so after conceptualizations or after ano yung gusto mong gawin doon sa, for example, building or bahay. So you're going to put it in a design. Para makita natin visually kung ano ba yung gusto mong mangyari dun sa research mo. Okay? So yung design na yon, it serves as a master plan of your research. Okay? So now what are the guiding principles in research design? Research design refers to a plan of action for meeting the objectives, just like your NCPs or the nursing care plan. Okay, you are generating the plan of actions through what would be your plan and what would be your implementations. Then after all, then you will gather the specific outcome. Ganun din po sa research design. Okay? A blueprint for conducting a study that maximizes control over factors that could interfere with the validity of the findings. Okay, before the research is implemented, the researcher must already be able to determine the research design he or she intends to use. Okay, will he or she use an experimental design or non-experimental design? Okay, it's really up to you. Okay, the researcher plans is how the study will be conducted. So, paano mo ba ikakonduct yung study? Okay, ano ba yung mga type of data na i-collect mo? And paano yung means mo on gathering these kinds of data? Okay, which are determined after variables are identified and quantified. Okay, so what are the purpose of research design? To provide a plan in answering the research question. Okay, each design has its own applicability depending on the problem and objectives of the study. Okay, just like your nursing care plan, this serves as a concrete plan to treat your research. Okay, these are the certain designs which is applicable to research problem. Research design will dictate you what is appropriate or proper type of design to be used in order for you to generate a reliable and a valid data or outcome. And of course, important considerations is to minimize the possible errors and maximize the reliability and validity of the data. Okay, moving on. What is reliability? What is validity? Okay, reliability refers to the consistency, stability, and dependability of the data. Are your data is consistent? Stable ba yung iyong data? Dependable ba yung iyong data? Okay? A research method should yield the same result even if conducted twice or more. Okay, that is consistency. Okay? So, validity is refers to the data that are not only reliable but also true and accurate. Is your data accurate or true? Okay, it refers to which extent an instrument is able to actually measure what is supposed to be measured. So, yung instrument ba na ginamit mo is really nakapag-arrive ka ba ng pertinent data for your study? Okay, a wrong choice of a design puts at risk the validity and reliability of the study. When this happens, it is quite difficult to find the real answer to a research question because there could be some rival hypothesis that can explain the occurrence of a problem. The selection of an appropriate study design can minimize possible errors by minimizing reliability or maximizing the reliability and validity of the data. Okay, valid data are not only reliable, okay, but also true and sound. So, as researcher, you must select a research design that will yield a true and accurate information and to avoid factors that can invalidate study results. Okay, there are threats, okay, to validity. Number one is the history. Number two is the selection. Number three, testing, instrumentation, maturation, and mortality. Okay, valid data are not only reliable but also true, sabi ko nga kanina. So, it is very important for you to select an appropriate research design for you to be able to yield a true and accurate informations and for you to avoid an invalidated study results. So, iisa-isahin natin yan. Ano ba itong mga threats to validity? Yung history, yung selection, the testing, instrumentation, maturations, and mortality. And magbibigay tayo ng examples isa-isa. Okay, moving on. History. This refers to the event that may occur during the time frame of the study which are not actually part of the study. Okay, they produce effect that influence the results of the study, either increasing or decreasing the expected result. Sometimes there are events in the life of the research project but which are not part of the project, okay, that can increase or decrease the expected project outcome. These events are not expected, they just happened and they produce effects that can invalidate the study result. For example, in the study of the effect of anti-smoking campaign on cigarette consumption among young adults in the city, okay, an intensive information campaign against smoking was launched in order to discourage smoking among young adults. Anti-smoking messages were disseminated on radio, television, and newspapers daily for a month. Okay, in the course of the campaign, a cigarette company also launched a product promotion, okay, offering a free trip to Europe for the consumers and the dealer who could collect and submit the most numbered of empty packs of the cigarette brand being promoted. Okay, a month after the launching of the anti-cigarette campaign, consumption in the study area. Okay, the researcher might conclude that the campaign was a failure. Okay, the conclusion here would be invalid because of the high possibility that the cigarette promotion or the historical event, okay, may have contributed to the increase in the cigarette consumption. Okay, while sabi nga kasi dito, while launching yung anti-smoking campaign is nag-launch naman tong specific brand of cigarette ng kanilang promo kung sino daw yung nakapagbigay ng madaming empty packs of cigarette, okay, may chance to win a trip to Europe. So, during your campaign, syempre 1 month mo yun na ikakandak yung campaign mo if there is changes, okay, on the behavior of the people. And nag-launch naman tong company na to. So, therefore, hindi magiging valid yung iyong result because of this certain circumstance. Okay? So, that is history. Okay, next, we have selections. Occurs when respondents of the study are chosen not only individually but as a group. Okay? So, basically, um, it is on the respondents or the populations or the group being treated or serves as the respondents. Okay, in an experimental study, a threat to validity occurs when the elements or subjects for the experimental group is very difficult from those selected from for the control group. For an instance, if at the beginning of this experiment, the experimental group already has an advantage over the control group in terms of the focus of the study, this difference will definitely affect the results of the study. So for example, okay, in an experiment conducted to determine if using games and puzzle as instructional aids can improve performance of the college freshmen in basic math. Okay, the teacher used game and puzzle in the experimental group but did not use them in the control group. Okay, after the experiment, it was found that the experimental group got significantly better grades in the subject than the controlled group. It was discovered, however, that the most of the students in the experimental group had very good grades in high school math. Okay, so hindi siya nakapag-pilot testing or conduct muna sana ng survey. Yun pala, yung mga binigyan niya ng treatment is very good in math. Okay, while most of those in the control group have the average grade only. Okay, attributing the better performance of the experimental group to use the games and puzzles can be questioned. Okay, so to avoid these validity threats, okay, the experimental and the control group should be similar characteristics at the beginning. Okay, so very important to conduct a pilot study or a survey first before we are going to apply any threat or control to our respondents or to our population group. Okay, next is the testing. Okay, refers to the pre-test given that results in an improved performance in the post. I'm sorry. Okay, in the post test, performance in the post test. To avoid this threat, a pretest may not be needed for administration. However, if the pretest is given, another measure is recommended to use as an alternative form of instrument. Okay, whenever a pretest is given, it may take the examinee's test wise, and this can therefore affect the post-test result. Okay, research subjects who have been given a pre-test may remember some of the test items questioned for which they may search answers and get this correct when they take the post-test. Okay, better performance in the post-test might be due to the effect of the pre-test and not necessary to the interventions or the treatment. Okay, so that is testing. So moving on for the instrumentation, it refers to unreliability in measuring instruments that may result to an invalid measurement of performance. Okay, the change in instrument used before or between the pretest and post-test may result in an effect not caused by the treatment introduced. Okay, when a research instrument such as questionnaire or measuring device like weighing scale or thermometer is changed during the study period or between the pretest and the post-test, okay, the change could result in an effect that is independent of the intervention and yet may be attributed to it. For example, in a survey study, an instrumentation effect may be caused by an interviewer who after conducting the pretest interview becomes more experienced in interviewing. Okay, the interview experience will enable him or her to generate better and or more complete information during the post-test than what was collected during the pretest. Okay, another example, in a biomedical study, the use of an unreliable device like a scale that badly needs calibration, a contaminated syringe, or a very old litmus paper may also threaten the validity of the test results. Okay, so make sure that your instruments are reliable and valid before you're going to conduct such a study. Okay, next. Maturation. This type refers to the physiologic and psychologic changes that may happen to the respondents of the study over a period of time. Okay, if the time frame of the training program is quite long and rigid, okay, pag masyado daw mahaba yung training program natin, the participant may experience some psychological discomfort due to boredom, tiredness, hunger, and the like. So, same with the research. Okay, people and things change over time. So, pabago-bago ang isipan ng bawat tao. In other words, they become more matured, and this change can threaten the validity of the conclusions. Okay, research subjects can get tired, hungry, or bored during the duration of the project. If the effect of a project is measured with a test, their tiredness or boredom can result in scores lower than their true scores. On the other hand, the subject may become more experienced, more knowledgeable as they grow older, and as a result, they may get higher scores than they did in the pretest. Okay, in this regard, the changes cannot be attributed to the intervention. Okay, next is the mortality. Okay, this refers to the loss of participants during the post-test stage. Okay, or even during the implementation of the time of the study frame. Okay, yung participants biglang nawala. There are certain factors or effect sa ating study. Okay, when the same group of individuals is studied over a long period of time. Okay, by the time of a follow-up study is conducted on the same group, some members may have dropped out, umalis, and may refuse to cooperate the further study. Okay, in the studies that take a long time to finish, say 1 year or more, okay, like cohort studies, okay, where the subjects or the same people are followed up over time, okay, some cases may drop out, okay, thus resulting in the loss of cases. Okay, so nakapag-set ka na din number of group populations, but then again, while you are conducting the study, isa-isa silang nagba-back out, isa-isa silang umaalis. Okay, some cases may have transferred residence and are difficult to locate during the follow-up interview. And cases which cannot be contacted cannot be followed up. Okay, this loss called mortality. Okay, may distort findings and conclusion if substantial and if it is introduced a bias to the sample. Okay, the loss could result in a big difference between the pre-test and the post-test result, of course. Okay, this may attribute to the intervention that threaten the validity of the conclusions. Okay, so hindi na magiging valid yung iyong result. Okay, what are the characteristics of research design? Okay, number one, the settings of which the research occurs. Okay, the laboratory setting, it is designed to be more highly controlled in relation to both the environment in which the study is conducted and the control of extraneous and intervening variables. Okay, they use laboratories for them to conduct data, especially very specific results should be attained. Okay, so they are using laboratories. Like for example, if they are developing a new drug or if they are developing the efficacy and efficiency of the drugs or the vaccines being conducted. Okay, they use the laboratory studies. Okay, moving on. Okay, characteristics of the research study, the settings by which the research occurs. Okay, field studies occurs outside the laboratory setting. So, field study and laboratory. studies. Okay, this occurs in natural settings and use a variety of methods such as, okay, if you are conducting field experiments or participants observation in the village or hospital wards, you are observing a certain group of people. An interview, and you are conducting interview to the home or in the office, or you are conducting questionnaires or anything at that's not occur in the controlled laboratory settings, okay, that is guarded as field studies. Okay, the subject to be included in the research, of course, the sample size or the number of subject in the study. Okay, determine the sample size, the respondents or the subject of the study, if they could provide the data for your study. If you are delimiting qualified respondents, it should be reflected on the characteristics of the sample population to be used. Okay, secondly, the method used to collect the data. Okay, it can be in the form of the checklist survey or in interview analysis of the related literature or documentary analysis. Okay, so third, sorry, third, the researchers plan for communicating the findings. Okay, what specific tool to be used in order for you to communicate your findings? Okay, it could be in the presentations or submission of the result to specific agency needed the data, okay, or for educational purposes wherein it serves a lot for the evidence-based practice, especially in nursing. Okay, timing of data collection. Okay, there are three: the prospective or longitudinal studies, the retrospective or the ex post facto or historical studies, and the cross-sectional studies. Okay, so let's define first the prospective or longitudinal studies, events that are underway or expected to occur in the future. Okay, in a longitudinal study, subjects are followed over time and continuous or repeated monitoring of risk factors or health outcomes or both. Such investigations may enormously in their size and complexity. At one extreme, a large population may be studied over decades. Okay, for example, okay, the longitudinal study of the Office of the Population Censuses and Surveys prospectively follow a 1% sample of the British population that was initially identified at the 1971 census. Outcomes such as mortality and incidence of cancer has been related to the employment status, housing, and other variables measured at successive censuses. At the other extreme, some longitudinal studies follow up relatively small groups for a few days or weeks. Thus, firemen acutely exposed to the noxious fumes might be monitored to identify many immediate effects. Okay, that is an example of longitudinal studies wherein it takes a range of time for you to able to gather a specific result. Okay, when we say retrospective, so from the word itself retro, so backward. So retrospective have occurred in the past. Okay, in a retrospective study, in contrast to the prospective study or the longitudinal study, the outcome of interest has been occurred at the time the study is initiated. There are two types of retrospective study. Number one is a case control study, and the other one is the retrospective cohort study. Okay, a retrospective study designs allow the investigator to formulate hypotheses about possible associations between an outcome and an exposure and to further investigate the potential relationships. However, a causal statement on this association usually should not be made from a retrospective study. Okay, in conducting a retrospective study, an investigator or the researcher typically uses administrative databases, medical records, or interview with patients who are already known to have a disease or condition. Generally, a retrospective study is the method of choice for the study of a rare outcome. Okay, sample of this is you wanted to analyze the certain documents. okay, that was made on the past. Okay, that is retrospective. Okay, retrospective type of study. Okay, next is the cross-sectional study, those in which data collected is strictly in the present time. Okay, cross-sectional study involves looking at the data from a population at one specific point in time. The participants in this study or type of study are selected based on the particular variables of interest. Okay, cross-sectional studies are often used in the developmental psychology, but this method is also used in many other areas, including social sciences and education. Cross-sectional studies, okay, are observational in nature and are known as descriptive research, not causal or relational. Okay, meaning that you can use you cannot use them to determine the cause of something such as disease. Okay, researchers record the information that is present in the population, but they do not manipulate any variables. Okay, so if the timing of the data collection, so prospective or longitudinal studies, it deals with the future. Retrospective, it deals with the past. Okay, cross-sectional study, it deals with the present time. Okay, that is the timing of the data collection. Next, there are types of the basic research. Okay, number one is the descriptive design. Number two is the experimental design. And number three is the qualitative method. Okay, commonly used research designs. Okay, the choice of the research design depends on the objective of the study, kung ano yung objective ng study mo or yung goal ng study mo. There are many types of research design that can be used in basic and experimental research. Okay, described here are the do's of the most frequently used designs. They are classified into um, non or pre-designed through experimental designs and quasi-experimental designs. Later on, we will discuss these things. Okay, so next is the descriptive design or descriptive research design is the most common method used in the researches. Okay, used when the purpose of the study is to inquire about the prevailing conditions of the event, object, or the people. If you want to describe something, okay, you will going to this to use the descriptive research design. Okay, the method describe what is in relation to the variables under consideration. Okay, descriptive research design is a scientific method which involves observing and describing the behavior of a subject without influencing it in any ways. Many scientific disciplines, especially social science and psychology, use this method to attain a general overview of the subject. Some subjects cannot be observed in any other way. For example, a social case study of an individual subject is a descriptive research design and allow observation without affecting normal behavior. Okay, it is also useful when it is not possible to test and measure the large number of samples needed for the more quantitative types of experimentations. Okay, next, okay, descriptive designs. Okay, these are some of the characteristics. It ascertains prevailing conditions of facts in the group or case study. Usually, yung mga case study natin is a descriptive designs. Okay, it gives either a quantitative or qualitative or both description of the general characteristics of the group or case under study. Okay, so what caused the prevailing condition is not emphasized. The study of conditions at different periods of time may be made, and the change that took place between the periods may be evaluated for any value it gives. So it really depending on the data to be offered. Okay, so comparison of the characteristics of two groups may be made to determine their similarities and differences. The variables involved in the study are not usually controlled. Okay, studies on prevailing conditions may or can be repeated for purpose of comparison and verifications. Okay, what are the types of descriptive research design. Number 1, exploratory descriptive design, descriptive survey design, correlational design, comparative design, case study, and of course, the feasibility study. Okay, so isa-isahin natin yan. So exploratory descriptive design, this provides an in-depth exploration of a single process, variables, or concept. The word exploratory indicates that none much is known. So that's why you are exploring, because there are very limited sources, okay, about your study. Okay, so means that the survey of the literature fails to reveal any significant research in the area. Okay, it is also defined as a research used to investigate a problem which are not clearly defined. Okay, it is conducted to have a better understanding of the existing problem but not provide conclusive result. For example, consider a scenario where a juice bar owner feels that the increasing the variety of uses will enable increase in customers. However, he is not sure and needs more information. The owner intends to carry out an exploratory research to find out, and hence decide to do an exploratory research to find out if expanding their uses selections will enable him to get more customers, of if there is a better ideas. Okay, that is the example of exploratory design. Gusto niya kung isang bar owner wanted um, to to give or to increase their variety of juices na available sa kanila. Kung ito ba ay makakapag-increase ng number of customers. So, ang gagamitin niya na design is exploratory descriptive design, because this is new to him. Okay? Next is the descriptive survey design, which is very popular. Ito yung usually na ginagamit ng ating mga researcher. Used when you intend to gather a relatively limited data from a relatively large number of subjects. Okay, this is used to maintain existing phenomenon without inquiring into why it exists. Okay, it uses surveys to gather data about varying subjects. This data aims to know the extent to which different conditions can be obtained among these subjects. For example, kung ang researcher gusto niyang i-determine yung qualification of employed professionals in Maryland, he uses a survey as this research instrument, and each item of the survey related to qualifications is subjected to a yes or no answer only in the form of a checklist. So this way, the researcher can describe the qualifications possessed by the employed demographics of this community. Ano ba yung mga usual na qualifications being identified dun sa survey. So that is a type of descriptive survey design. Okay, correlation design studies the relationship of two or more variables, has a conceptual base, and is looking for cause and effect relationship in the results. Okay, so but cannot specify the directions of the relationship at the beginning of the study. Okay, so we have to identify kung ano ba yung relationship, direction of relationship. Okay, that is correlational studies or correlational design. Okay, it measures the relationship between two variables without the researcher controlling either of them. So there is no controlling of the variables. Okay, it aims to find out whether there is positive relationship, if there is positive correlation, if there is negative correlation, or if there is zero correlation. When we say positive correlations, okay, both variable changes in the same directions. For example, as height increases, weight also increases. That is positive correlation. So pag matangkad ka daw, ganun din tataas din daw yung iyong timbang. Okay? So negative correlation naman is the variable changes in opposite directions. Like for example, as coffee consumption increases, okay, pag mahilig ka daw uminom ng kape, okay, yung iyong tiredness ay magdi-decrease. Okay, that is negative correlations. When we say zero correlation, there is no relationship between the variables. Okay, so these are the types of correlations: positive, negative, and the zero correlations or no correlation at all. Okay, comparative design naman, okay, examines and describes differences in variables in two or more groups that occur naturally in the setting. Specifies cause and effect at the beginning of the study and is based on a theoretical framework. Okay, the design of comparative research is simple. Okay, your object are specimens or cases which are similar in some respects, otherwise it would not be meaningful to compare them. Okay, so but they differ in some respects. Okay, so these differences become the focus of your examination, or your goal is to find out why the cases are different. Okay, to reveal the general underlying structure which generates or allows such a variation. That is comparative design. Dapat kung magko-compare ka, okay, there should be a same object or specimen or cases. Okay, but then they varied into some other aspect. Okay, for you to able to utilize this kind of research design. Okay, next case study is the extensive exploration of a single unit of study such as person, family groups, communities or institutions, or a very small number of subjects who are examined intensively. Okay, it is an in-depth study of a particular research problem rather than sweeping statistical survey or comprehensive comparative inquiry. It is often used to narrow down a very broad field of research into one or a few easily researchable examples. Okay, the case study research design is also useful for testing whether a specific theory and model actually applies to phenomena in the real world. It is also a useful design when not much is known about an issue or the certain phenomena. So that is case study. Feasibility study is the study tries to determine the viability of an undertaking or a business venture like establishing an institution or constructing an infrastructure. So, very important siya sa mga business, ventures, ganyan. Feasibility studies if they can able to earn a profit or not. Ano? With their plans, okay, with their specific strategies, ganun. The owner will be conducting feasibility studies. Okay? So are used to determine whether an intervention is appropriate for further testing in order, or in other words, okay, they enables the researcher to assess whether or not the ideas and the finding can be shaped to be relevant and sustainable. So, so with the feasibility study alone, so makikita mo if the business venture will grow or if it will fail. So, feasibility study is very important to conduct first. Okay, such research may identify not only what, if anything, in the research methods or protocols needs modifications, okay, but also how changes might occur. Okay, for you to able to have interventions or some modifications na pwede mong gawin. Okay, so after feasibility study. Okay, moving on, experimental design. So let's move with the experimental design naman. The central characteristics, there is a manipulating the independent variable and measuring the effect of the dependent variable. So yung independent variable, binibigyan siya ng treatment, while the dependent variable is sometimes no treatment at all. So therefore, makikita nila kung ano yung changes between the two variables. Okay, that is experimental design. The classical experimental designs consist of the experimental group and the control group. Okay, when we say experimental group, these are the independent variables that can be manipulated. Okay? So, ito yung mga independent variable natin na binibigyan ng treatment or minamanipulate or binibigyan ng manipulations. Okay, while in the control group, the dependent variable is measured when no alteration has been made on the independent variable. So, for the controlled group, there is no treatment being provided. Okay, based on the data gathered, you have to take note of the certain changes that may attribute for the comparison of the experimental group and of course the controlled group. Okay, so controlled group is the dependent variable is measured in the experimental group the same way and at the same time as in the controlled group. Okay, actual observation at a specific time and duration in order to yield a reliable and valid data. Okay, so this table shows you kung ano yung mga nabibigyan ng treatment or remained unchanged. Okay, so for the experimental group, the independent variable is changed. The dependent variable is being measured to know the comparison between the two. Then the control group still remains unchanged. For the independent variable and the dependent variable, it is being measured. Okay, so manipulations, okay, or implementation of treatment, okay, means the researcher works on the independent variables so that some of the subjects are affected. Some variables in the experiment may not be manipulated. Okay, when we say manipulations, you are going to provide treatment, okay, to a certain group. Okay, when we say control naman, okay, the researcher says one or more measures to control the experiments, including the use of an unmanipulated control group that is compared with an experimental group. Okay, control, there is no treatment na ibibigay sa ating population group. Okay? It is also attained by allowing for no variables, specifying the variations to be allowed and distributing the variations equally. Okay, so what are the types of experimental design? We have the pre-experimental designs, or we have pre-experimental designs or the non-experimental designs. Okay, the true experimental and of course the quasi-experimental. Okay, so let's start with the pre-experimental or the non-experimental designs. These are the appropriate for collecting descriptive informations about a population or subjects of the study. They are appropriate for descriptive studies like profile studies, exploratory studies, and for doing small case studies. They are also ideal for diagnostic studies intended to determine the effect or impact of uncertain intervention or treatment. Okay, there are three non-experimental designs are being described under our next slides. They are the post-test only or after only design, the pre-test post-test design, and the static group comparison. Okay, so let's move with the one-shot case study. It involves one group that are exposed to the treatment and then post-tested. Okay? So, bakit siya tinawag na pre-experimental design? Kasi nga iisa lang yung iyong group. Okay? So, yung isang group daw is exposed sa treatment, then after that, i-post test mo. Okay? So, none of the threats to validate that are relevant is controlled. Okay, the design is also used as one-shot survey because the data are collected only once. Kaya nga siya tinawag na one-shot case study. This design is used when the study objective is to describe a situation or condition of the study population as it exists, or to determine or to describe the characteristics of the population or the respondents. There is no baseline data. Okay, take note of that. This design is cheap and easy to conduct, but the results can not on the conclusive in terms of causality or effects of an intervention. It is not, however, recommended for evaluation studies that intend to measure the effect of the program interventions like training. Okay, kasi dun sa training, parang meron ka ng treatment na binigay sa mo siya i-test. Ito kasi is treatment agad then post-test. Okay, so one-shot studies. Or sa training kasi usually you are determining first your populations. Okay, so that is the pre-experimental one-shot case study. Okay, one group pre-test post-test design. It involves one group that is pre-tested, then exposed to a treatment, and then post-tested. So, ang kwan dyan, parang meron tayong pre-tested, then X will be the treatment, then there is a post-test. So, OXO, that is the one group pre-test post-test design. Although it controls several sources of validity not controlled by one shot case study, a number of additional factors are relevant to this are not controlled. Okay, this design is used when the study wants to know the changes in characteristics, for example, the knowledge, attitude, and practices of the study population like students, nurses, managers, clients, and etc. in a given area. Okay, a survey, observation, or testing is conducted before an intervention is introduced. Ayun. Then, after a period of time, the survey, observation, or testing is repeated. Okay, and the results of pre-test or before and the post-test after are compared to determine if there is changes. For example, if a researcher want to know if an information campaign against drug or substance abuse in a certain city has reduced drug use in the area after the campaign. Okay, a survey before and after the campaign can be conducted. There is no control area or area where no campaign is conducted. However, it is surveyed. Okay, with the absence of a controlled area, this design cannot be considered a experimental design. Any reduction in drug use over time cannot be solely or conclusively attributed to the intervention campaign. Okay, so dun sa example na binigay natin, the researcher gusto niyang malaman kung naging effective ba yung information campaign. So, there is post-test and there is a treatment being provided. Then after that, pre-test, then treatment provided, and then post-tested. That is a one group pre-test post-test design. Okay, next, pre-test post-test controlled group design. It involves at least two groups, okay, both of which are formed by random assignment. Both groups are administered a pre-test of the dependent variable. One group receives a new or usual treatment and both groups are post-tested. Okay, so let's we are talking about the true experiment na. Okay, pre-test, post-test control group. Okay, let's describe first what is true experimental design. Okay, true experimental design, subjects are randomly assigned to the experimental group and control group to achieve pre-intervention or treatment equally of the two groups. Okay, validity threats are avoided. Before a researcher decides on the alternative design, okay, the feasibility of using true experimental design must first be considered. Okay, the two most frequently used true experimental designs are the pre-test, post-test controlled group design and the post-test controlled group design. Okay, in the pre-test, post-test controlled group design, the experimental group is exposed to or covered by an intervention or a treatment. For example, training or a new strategy, while the control group is left alone. Okay, or given another kind of treatment. Okay, before the intervention or treatment is introduced to the experimental group and control group using the same device or instrumentation or instrument. The pre-intervention or the survey observation or the test serves as a pre-test. Okay, and the data collected serve as the baseline data. After the introduction of the intervention in the experimental group or area, an evaluation or survey observation testing is conducted in both experimental group and the controlled group using the same instrument used in both during the pre-test. Okay, so the result serves as the post-test or the end-line data. Okay, the baseline, pretest, and the end line, which is the post-test data, are being compared. Okay, if the change in the in-fact or effect indicators or dependent variables is significantly better in the experimental area or group than in the change in the controlled area or group, then the intervention is considered effective if there is certain changes from the controlled group and of course the experimental group. If not, then the intervention is now said to have had effect. Okay, kung there is no um, comparison, so the effects or the intervention is said to have no effect. Okay, or not non-significant. Okay, next, post-test only controlled group design. Same as the pre-test and post-test controlled group design, except that there is no pre-test. So, wala na pong pre-test na ikakandak dito. Only post-test lang. So, subjects are randomly assigned to groups, exposed to independent variables, and then post-tested. Okay? The post-test only group or controlled group design is also used to determine the effects of an interventions or treatment introduced to a group of subject or people or object. As in the pre-test post-test control group design, at least two groups or areas with virtually the same characteristics are chosen and randomly assigned to a controlled and experiment group. Okay? The experimental group or area is exposed to or covered by an intervention or treatment while the control group is left alone. No pre-test or pre-intervention study is conducted. The experimental and the control groups are assumed to have similar characteristics at the start of the study. After the introduction of an intervention in the experiment group or area, an evaluation or survey, observation, or testing is conducted in both experimental and control groups or areas using the same FAIR instrument. Okay, the data gathered from the experimental and control groups are being compared. Then, if the experimental group or area showed significantly better result than the control group or area with respect to the impact or effects or indications or dependent variables, the interventions or treatment is considered effective or significant. But if not, okay, the intervention is not effective. Okay. Another, the Solomon four-group design. It involves random assignment of the subject to one of the four groups. Okay, two groups are post-tested and the other group two are not. Okay, one of the pre-tested group and the other of the unpretested groups receive the experimental treatment. So sa Solomon four group design, so it is you to determine kung saan ka mag-pre-test, kung saan ka mag-post test. Okay? So quasi-experimental naman tayo. Non-equivalent controlled group designs. Okay, like the pre-test and post-test controlled group design, it does not involve random assignment. Okay, the lack of the random assignment adds a source of invalidity not associated with the pre-test post-test controlled group. Okay, in field studies, it is very difficult to meet the random assignment criterion of true experimental design. In these situations, a quasi-experimental design is recommended. When you say quasi-experimental designs, these are nearly the same as the true experiment designs, except that the former do not have restrictions of random assignment. Okay, the two more commonly used quasi-experimental designs are the non-equivalent controlled group designs and the time series design. Okay, in the field of research, it is possible to compare an experimental group with a similar but not necessarily equivalent group. Okay, the two groups need only to have collective similarity, which means that they should have more or less the same characteristics in terms of aspects, which are relevant to the study. For example, if you want to determine the impact of an educational campaign on the school attendance of the children, the experimental and the controlled areas should have more or less the same socioeconomic characteristics because these factors may also affect the school attendance. Okay, as in the present pre-test post-test controlled group design, the interventions or treatment is introduced to the experimental group but with help from the controlled group. Before the introduction of the intervention, a survey observation testing is conducted in order or in both the experimental group and the control group. After the introduction of the intervention to the experimental group, another observation or testing is conducted to both group. Okay, the pretest can be used to determine whether the two groups have truly collective similarity at the start of the experiments. Okay, the results of the two post-tests will also be compared. Okay, the intervention is effective if the changes or the impact of or effect indicators in the experiment group is significantly higher or better than the change in the impact or effect or indicators in the control group. Okay, if not, then the interventions cannot be considered effective. This design is a good one for evaluating training programs and other community intervention. Okay, time series analysis. It is an elaborations of the one group pre-test post-test design in which one group is repeatedly pre-tested, exposed to a treatment, and repeatedly post-tested. Okay, kaya nga siya tinawag na time series. Okay, so the time series designs is similar to the non-experimental pre-test post-test design except that has repeated observation or measurement before and after the intervention. Before the introduction of the intervention or treatment, a measurement or observations with respect to the impact or effect or indicators will conducted several times at irregular interval, say every 30 days for example. Okay, and then after the interventions, another series of measurement or observations will be conducted, also at the same time intervention as the first, and the same measuring instrument or device should be used at the same time. The result or pattern of the observations or testing in the first series of measurement will be compared with that in the series of the measurements after the intervention. If the post-intervention results or pattern is better than that of the pre-intervention series, then the interventions can be considered effective. Okay, however, if the pre-interventions and post-intervention results or pattern are the same, or the post-intervention result is not significantly better than that of the pre-interventions, then the interventions cannot be considered as effective. For example, you wanted to evaluate the effect of feeding program, which is intended to improve the nutritional status of the preschool children in a barangay. So before the introduction of a feeding program, the children or the program beneficiaries will be weighed or measured several times at a regular interval. For example, every 30 days. And then after the feeding program, another series of weighing or measurement will be conducted. Okay? Also at the same time interval at the first series or every 30 days. Okay, in order for the feeding program to be considered effective in improving the nutritional status of the children's weights should be improved after the feeding program. Since the children are also growing, increase in weight may also be observed during the series of pre-intervention changes must be significantly better than the pre-intervention changes. If norm, the um, the feeding program could not be considered as having effectively improved the nutritional status of the children. Okay, so like for example, you are conducting yun nga, a feeding program. So every now and then you will evaluate their weight. Tapos every after feeding program, okay, sa next feeding program, i-check nyo ulit yung weight if there is improvement. So that is the basic example of time series analysis. Okay, so moving on, the counterbalance design, all groups receive all treatments but in a different order. Okay, the only restriction is that the number of groups equals the number of control. Okay? The number of groups equals to the number of control. Counterbalancing is a procedure that allows the researcher to control the effect of a variables in designs where the same participants are repeatedly subjected to conditions, treatments, or stimuli. Okay, counterbalancings refer to the systematic variations of the order of conditions in the study, which enhance the study's interval validity. In the context of experimental designs, the most common nuisance factors to be counterbalanced are the procedural variations, okay, that can create order and sequence effects. In quasi-experimental designs, blocking variables like, for example, age and gender can also be counterbalanced to control their effects on the dependent variables of the interest, thus compensating for the lack of random assignment and the potential compounds due to the systemic selection bias. Okay, that is counterbalance design. Okay, qualitative. Let's move with the qualitative method. Historical method. This method is past-oriented. So, you are determining studies from the past. Tapos, you are going to check if most, if you are going to check or analyze, okay, these previous literature or studies and make a comparisons out of it. So that is qualitative method. Okay, the objective is to interpret events in the light of the present situations, if there is correlational between the past and of course the present. Okay, that is historical method. So ethnographical method naman, or ethnographic method, okay, defined as the environment or setting where the behavior occurs, okay, as the larger domains of which a given phenomenon is a part, okay, as intermediately relevant aspect of a situation, okay, as lack of experiences that incorporates thoughts, acts, and the past as a frame of reference that directly influence current decisions making about specific issues. Okay, ethnography, fake method. Ito naman yung you wanted to know the culture, lifestyles of a certain indigenous group, or the same thing, certain group of people. You will be using ethnographic method under the qualitative. So we already discussed this on our previous discussions. Okay, another qualitative is the phenomenological method, described as an approach in sociology that is based on human character as the subject matter of the discipline. So you wanted to know the experiences or the living experience of a person. So you will be using the phenomenological method. It is also described as interpretive, intuitive, and dialectic approach. Okay, thank you. That ends our discussion about the research design.